This is Chapter 5, Greece, and we are moving into Section 4, Alexander's Empire. This section focuses on the empire building of Alexander the Great when he conquered Persia, Egypt, and extended from Greece all the way to the Indus River in India. The reason it matters now: Alexander is going to combine these cultures together into a new civilization that still impacts world culture today. Vocabulary for this section includes Macedonia, Philip II, Olympia, Battle of Sharona, League of Corinth, Alexander the Great, Darius III, Battle of Granicus, Battle of Gaugamela, Seleucus, Antigonus, and Ptolemy. The P is silent. In northern Greece is Macedonia, a hard land of rocky mountains, difficult to live in. While the Macedonians considered themselves part of the Greek culture, the other Greeks from the south considered them savage barbarians. This is Philip of Macedonia, Philip II. He was king of Macedonia with three goals: to unite the villages of Macedonia into one kingdom instead of separate villages, to conquer the rest of Greece, and to take revenge on Persia for the attacks before. Some of you may notice that in the picture he's missing an eye. According to reports, this was taken by an arrow during a siege war. Philip united a lot of areas through warfare, but he was also a shrewd politician and made several marriage alliances. His fourth wife would be Myrtle, who would later call herself Olympia. To Olympia would be born two children, one son named Alexander and a daughter named Cleopatra. This is not the famous Cleopatra of Egypt. However, the two are related. According to the stories, Alexander the Great was born at the same time that lightning struck. A lot of people took this to be a sign of Zeus's blessing. Also, he was reported to have been born on the same day that the Temple of Artemis burned, one of the 7 wonders of the world, which we will talk about more later. It is said that Philip received news of Alexander's birth on the same day that he learned of a military victory and that his horses won at the races. Son, horses, army, it was a good day for Philip. Athens and Sparta had fought each other during the Peloponnesian War and set many city-states on edge. As a result, at the end of the war, all of Greece was weakened. This gave Philip the chance he needed to take over the rest of Greece. Athens and Thebes put up the biggest resistance at the Battle of Sharona, but they lose badly as Alexander leads the first charge into their lines. This is Alexander the Great's first military conquest at the age of only 16. Eventually, all of Greece would unite under Philip except for Sparta, the only city-state that he never even attempted to attack. After conquering most of Greece, Philip set up the League of Corinth. Member city-states continued to keep their own governments, but swore loyalty to Philip. Each city-state could send a representative to the city of Corinth, hence the name League of Corinth, in order to represent their city on matters of politics, military, whatever might come up. Philip, however, had the final say. Philip had announced that he was planning on marrying his 7th wife. In doing so, he was going to divorce Olympia, claiming that she had cheated on him and that Alexander wasn't really his son. Before he could finalize the divorce or get married, Philip is attending the marriage of his daughter. At that marriage, Philip is assassinated by one of his own guards, a man reputed to be his male lover on the side, and possibly set up to do so by Olympia. Unfortunately, this is one of those mysteries in history we may never actually know the answer to. Growing up, Alexander the Great was reported to have had 3 teachers. The first one taught rigid discipline, military discipline, sleeping on hard rocks, standing at attention. Second one taught him literature, specifically focusing on Homer's Iliad and Odyssey, and kept referring to Alexander as Little Achilles, as in the character from the Iliad who was invincible except for his ankle. His third tutor was Aristotle, who taught him philosophy, ethics, politics, and medicine. These 3 put together are going to mold the character of Alexander for life. One famous story about the character of Alexander comes from the story of his horse. According to this tale, a horse was brought for sale to Philip, but no one could ride it, and Philip considered it useless. Alexander turned to his father and claimed that he could tame the horse, and if he did, would his father buy it for him. The two made a bet. If Alexander was able to ride the horse, Philip would pay for it. If Alexander was not able to ride the horse, Alexander had to pay for it, and for its upkeep for as long as it was alive. Alexander noticed that the horse had a fear of its own shadow. He then turns the horse towards the sun, placing the shadow behind it, mounts the horse, and rides it around, careful not to allow it to see its own shadow, wins the bet, and gets the horse that he would ride into most of the battles for the rest of his time. He names this horse Bucephalus, Greek for ox head, out of its stubbornness. On Philip's assassination, several of the city-states tried to break away from the Macedonian Empire and the League of Corinth. Alexander puts a stop to this. Thebes and Athens had been in alliance in the rebellion. After defeating Thebes thoroughly and putting all of their male citizens into slavery, Athens follows the example and quickly surrenders. Alexander also visits the Oracle of Delphi, and the only thing she says to him is, "My son, you are invincible." On becoming king of Macedonia, Alexander sets out to accomplish his father's third goal, attack Persia. He takes with him a mere 35,000 troops. In 334, he defeats the Persians at the Battle of Granicus. In 333, he defeats the Persians again at the Battle of Issus. At the Battle of Issus, Darius III, king of the Persians, was in such a rush to retreat that he left behind his wife and his mother, who he had brought with him to observe his victory. Alexander took these two prisoner, and when the troops asked what was to be done with them, he replied, "Let them use my tent, and let them have my food." They were treated as honored guests until they reached the next town where he could safely send them on their way without risk of their well-being. Later, Alexander will capture the city of Tyre. Tyre was an island just off the coast. People had retreated, figuring Alexander couldn't reach them without boats. Instead, Alexander lined up his soldiers and had them use their shields and helmets to shovel dirt into the water until they built a land bridge out to the island. To this day, Tyre is still on a peninsula as a result of this. From Tyre, Alexander heads south into Egypt. He defeats the Persians, chases them out of Egypt, and the Egyptians hail him as a hero because they had been tired of Persian abuse. He builds a new city there named Alexandria after himself, one of several that he was going to name this. He is then taken to an oasis considered sacred to the Egyptian people and proclaimed son of Zeus. On leaving Egypt, Alexander appoints his general Ptolemy in charge, the Ptolemy who married his sister Cleopatra and would be the ancestors of the famous Cleopatra of Egypt. Alexander squares off with Darius III again at the Battle of Gaugamela. Darius retreats into the mountains, abandoned by his army and followed only by a few loyal soldiers. Alexander now controls all of Persia. He continues on to Babylon, capital of Persia at the time, where Darius's mother greets him and adopts him as her own son, disowning Darius. I guess that hospitality when she was a prisoner paid off. In 330, 1 year later, Alexander chases Darius into the Zagros Mountains, finds Darius dead along the roadways, presumably poisoned by his own officers who were tired of the defeats in battle. Alexander continues to expand his empire until it covers an area larger than the continental United States today. The only thing that stops him is when he reaches India and the Indus River. The chariots that he had brought with him were incapable of maneuvering well in the swamps. He retreats back to Babylon, intending to return, but never gets the opportunity. On his return to Babylon, Alexander takes ill and dies. Some people claim it was over-drinking, some theorize that his generals poisoned him, and some conclude that he died of malaria contracted by mosquitoes in the swamps of India. Since we do not currently have his body, only the coffin it was supposed to be in, we cannot do a scientific analysis to discover what it was that caused the death. What we do know from reports, though, was that Alexander's last request, as he lay ill and dying, were to be taken to the Hanging Gardens of Babylon so that he could die amidst their beauty. On his death, without an heir to take control, the empire was divided among the generals, with the largest and most important portions going to Seleucus, who got most of what used to be Persia, Antigonus, who got Anatolia, modern-day Turkey, and the coast around Tyre and Jerusalem, and Ptolemy, who was going to get Egypt.